Welcome, viewers, to Aegelis Interviews, where we talk to everyday people doing extraordinary things. Hats off to our guest today. Let's go. Today, I am happy to introduce to you MimiQ. She is the musician who has composed and produced a debut EP called The Dances of Us. Good evening, MimiQ. Thank you for taking the time and talking with us about your work.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Great to have you. Can you walk us through The Dances of Us and share with us what the music set is all about?
Sure. So the Dances of Us took about maybe 5 years to make. It's basically a story that's being told primarily through music, no lyrics or anything, but it's basically just about the stages of any loving relationship, whether it's with another person, whether it's with yourself, or whether it's with a higher power. It goes through all the basic stages of a relationship where you first meet someone, you start to get to know them, and then you kind of hit this place in the relationship where you've known a couple of things that maybe you're not so into and you're struggling to figure out, well, do I want to stick with this person or do I want to move forward, stuff like that. And then you really have this moment where you figure out, okay, this is the person that I want to be with for the rest of my life. So then there's that sweet resolve. And then there's a little bit of insight into the future where like everything's happy and bright because you stuck it out. So yeah, it's really personal to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great to see music unfold into a story and especially a love story. Looking at the cover, what I really like about this is the warm color and
Mhm.
the engagement of the two figures. Can you tell us more about this cover?
Yes, so actually my cousin Ronald Purnell, he actually did this album cover. He's a very, very talented artist. And the inspiration behind the album cover actually was me and my boyfriend. We had been childhood best friends. We actually met while we were in middle school. And it's a really crazy story. He was the one that always like was into me first, but I never quite saw it until I got into my 20s. And it was a thing where I really had to ask God, like, is this the man that you want for me? And it took a while for me to really see it, but without knowing it, doing this project actually helped me to realize that this is the man that I'm supposed to be with. And coming up with the album cover, I always had this vision of me just looking at him and looking at all of this stuff that we had been through in our lives together and just coming to that sweet resolve like God had really answered my prayers. So that's how I wanted the album cover to be. I wanted it to be a snapshot of our love, the love that we had for each other as friends and even as a couple now. And I hopefully that can translate into other people's relationships, even if it's just with self or God or, whatever. But that was basically the story I wanted to tell just with the album cover alone.
What was it about your relationship that inspired you to make music from it? Or were you always into music and said, I'm going to tell the story of my relationship with the music?
Actually, I think it's a little bit of both. Growing up, I've always listened to primarily instrumental music. Like my dad would always have smooth jazz playing in the background, and usually smooth jazz doesn't really have any vocals. But I think it created such a love for me with instrumental music because with my type of imagination, I could always pick out like different stories to tell with certain instruments, certain notes that could be played, different chord progressions. So, on top of wanting to tell a story about my own life and what I've been through, I always wanted to make music that could create a story just with music itself and not with any type of lyrics, trying to paint like a specific picture. But on top of me wanting to kind of be like a storyteller with music, I also wanted people to have the opportunity to think of their own story with my music. So that's why right now I'm primarily focused on composing instrumental music because I feel like the imagination is really important when it comes to creating anything, really. And I feel like me as an artist, if I give people the opportunity to really use their imagination while just listening to something, that means I've done my job correctly.
Absolutely. What would you say is the best thing about being a musician?
Ooh, there's so many. Um, I think one of the best things for me about being a musician is that I automatically think outside the box. Like there could be, and this is so random, but there could be a vacuum cleaner that's going off And if there's a song playing and I hear like an inflection in the vacuum cleaner, I could be like, oh, that's in the same key as the song. But
Nice.
like little quirky stuff like that. It's like those perks come with being a musician because you see stuff, you hear stuff in a totally different way, and it kind of trains your ear to even think about things a different way, which helps to make different types of music. So we're kind of like made with like that little extra pinch of salt that nobody else gets.
Sure, adds a little spice to the mix.
Yeah.
Are you currently working on any projects, or do you have plans on working on more projects?
I am. So it's really crazy actually, because originally I was going to have an album that kind of catered to video game-esque music, but that still told a story. But then I started making songs that had more R&B elements to it, that I would actually want to put lyrics and stuff to it. And in my mind, I was like, maybe for my debut album, I want people to get an actual glimpse of my own voice before I continue with letting them tell their own stories. So I kind of switched the rollouts of the albums. So I'm technically working on two albums as we speak. A lot of work, spending a lot of hours in the studio working on different bits of songs, but it's a very fulfilling feeling because I get to really experiment with what I thought I couldn't do when I first started. And now I'm trying to branch out with different sounds, different concepts, all of that good stuff.
Excellent. Do you have any advice for aspiring musicians?
Mm. The biggest piece of advice that has really helped me is to always stay true to yourself. Especially in this day and age with the current climate in the music industry, everybody's really trying to do what's popular. And it makes sense because what's popular can, it can get you popular. It can get you
Sure.
exposure. It can get you followers. And there's a lot of good tools within that popular, state to get you where you want to be. But at the end of the day, if you're not genuinely yourself, you won't necessarily last long in the music industry because a lot of the music industry now is all about trends.
Hmm.
And I was actually watching an interview today, and one of the artists said that it's okay to do what most people do to get popular, but if you don't make it your own and you don't show who you are authentically to people, because people want what's real and
Sure.
they want people to be genuine. If you don't show that as an artist, people don't really see like your direction, where you're trying to go. Who are you as an artist? And for me, one of the sole purposes of making art and making music is to show people an extension of who I am without really having to talk. Like music is literally an extension of me. So I want to try to express that through songs, solely through music, but while also being authentic. So be yourself and don't be afraid to be yourself.
Excellent. I think that could go very well with other arts or any other profession as well.
Absolutely.
Do you have a favorite song on the EP?
Ooh, my favorite song is the second to last track. It's called We Made It, and it features my dad, TM,
Hmm.
right? Coincidentally, that was actually the very first song that I had started working on for the EP. Back at that time, I think it was around 2019 or so, I was in a very different place than I was now. Everything was going great. That's why the song itself is like a very happy, like uptune beat. But it's really special to me because it was actually the very first song that I had completed, like a complete song. Like it wasn't just 2 minutes, 1 minute. Because at the time I was still in school, still learning how to be a music producer, what not to do, what to do. So as I was finding myself as my own music producer, I was only doing like little snippets of music just to see, well, okay, I don't really like doing this genre. I don't like this sound. And then once I started doing that specific track, I started finding my niche. And with me, it's creating like different tones within a song. So like the first verse could be like very minor, very sad. Second verse could be major, and then the bridge could be somewhere in between, but then somehow towards the end of the song it all ties together. And that's kind of how I wanted to approach this specific track, because with the layout of the EP, that track is basically a synopsis of everything that happened in the relationship so far. But by the end of the track, you come to this sweet resolve where everything finally makes sense. So that's why I'm very proud of it, because it's basically my baby. And icing on the cake, of course, was getting my dad to sing on it because he's a great musician within himself. So
I agree, and I was very pleased to hear that collaboration also. One of my favorite tracks was Rhythms of Agape, and this one has a unique backstory I think you had mentioned before to me, but can you tell me a little bit of how this track came about?
Yes. So to be very frank, this song is basically an accident. So what happened was I was listening to one of my many versions of We Made It, because I like to save different versions before I go in for the final mix and final master and see what I don't want, see what I do want. And for some reason, after I had finished editing a track, I had forgotten to unmute all of the instruments except for the rhythm section. So I played it back and I didn't hear the guitar. And I was like, wait a minute. But for some reason, something told me, don't stop it, just let it play and see how it sounds. And I loved it. Like the sound was so dope because for me, I'm so hyper fixed on a certain aspect of a song, even though there's a bunch of different things going on in it, that I didn't quite understand what I was doing with the rhythm section. So, on top of actually hearing what was going on, I could hear a bunch of different like rhythms on top of rhythms. And it wasn't just like, a 4-on-4 type beat, like boom, cat, boom. Like it was all these different layers just in the rhythm section.
Hmm.
And what was crazy to me was the way I had wrote it, or written it, I should say. Um, the story was still being told, but primarily through drums. And I remember I had asked one of my dearest friends to listen to it because he's also a musician. And he told me something about the rhythm is very primal
Yeah,
and very tribal. And
yeah.
I wanted to keep that because that type of essence is something that it was in a lot of the relationships that I've been in, including the one that I'm with now. Everything was very raw, everything was very like in your face, a bunch of different things happening at once, but it all moved in such a harmonious way that it still sounded good. So I was like, I want to keep this in the EP because it tells a story within itself. So for a lot of you producers out there, keep the accidents that happen in your sessions because they may end up being a song.
That's great advice. And that was the one where when I heard that started playing, that was one that I wanted to get up and dance to. I was like, all right, let's do this. Let's burn some energy.
Exactly.
And shortly thereafter, there was a piece called Redemption, which I really
Mm.
appreciated. There's this very warm cello that raises up and it's like a warm blanket.
And I love the cello. Cello is one of my favorite instruments, so I wanted to have it somewhere in my EP.
Hmm. Is there something specific about digital music that you like?
Oh man, what I love about digital music is that it's very unconventional and it's very untraditional. In fact, on my website that I have, I just wrote a blog about how digital music is actually kind of making a comeback. While I was in school, I ended up taking a course, and the name of the course is escaping me, but one of the subjects that we had covered was a musician named oh no, Brian Eno, and he was a musician within his own self, but he wouldn't have called himself that. The one of his biggest albums that he did was primarily made through loops.
Hmm.
And the way that came about was he had gotten in this really bad accident that had him bedridden for like months on end,
Wow.
and his best friend gave him an album that had instrumental harp music. And what was crazy was when he was listening to it, I don't know if there was something wrong with his sound system at the time, but for some reason, his speakers would only play the loud parts of the music. And it got him to thinking, I could do something with this.
Sure.
So it was a very still moment that he had. And it was raining outside. He was laying in bed and he was listening to these loud parts of the music. And that's when he figured out I could really compose something with this, and doing the bare minimum of just taking some tapes and looping the same phrase over and over again, but with different like attitudes and everything. And that's how digital music was created. They call it generative music because it's basically an ongoing mood that happens that you can kind of accompany with everyday life. And I remember learning about that And I was like, I wonder if I can do that, but make it, more modern and maybe take it a step further, where instead of it being just one mode of music, it takes you through different, different states, different imaginations, different places. So that's where I had started incorporating my sound library and my Logic Pro app. They have all these different loops, all these different sounds. And what I do is I take maybe one of those loops and keep it as it is. But what I do is all of the other stuff that I use, I heavily edit it to work around that loop. So that way it can move like an actual song, but it's all done digitally. There's no live instruments, no vocals unless I want it to be, but it's all done specifically on the computer.
Hmm.
So, and I think in that way, I kind of opened myself up to another realm of production that not a lot of music producers can do. At least not a lot of music producers are open about, because
Hmm.
there are a lot of people in the music world that would think, well, if you're a music producer, you have to know how to play an instrument, you have to have an actual studio with a bunch of mics and all this other stuff. And you don't necessarily have to. What I'm learning in this generation of music producers and artists in general, they do a lot of things DIY, do it yourself, buy it yourself. A lot of my friends that have home studios, it's either just one mic, a desktop computer, and maybe one MIDI or one keyboard, and that's it. You can do so much with just the bare minimum. And that's why I think digital composition is so important, because even though it seems limited because you're just using your computer, there's so much stuff you can do when you just open yourself up to being playful and being experimental. And
Sure.
that's what I like about digital composition. It's very experimental.
Yeah, I was a little surprised too that it was instrumental because you have a vocal background, right?
I do. I do. And that's a lot of people have said that. And I think with me, I won't say I'm super confident in my vocal ability. I am a very good singer, I will say that. But I think with me, the importance for this EP was to just tell a story about my life just with music. And I didn't want my voice necessarily to get in the way, because that can hinder people's other imagination by thinking just one way about a song when it could be taken so many different ways. Now, if
Sure.
I do want to tell a specific story, I will definitely start using my own voice with stuff. But with this EP, I just wanted it to be straight music.
Sure. And looking forward to that in the future as well. So,
Yes.
who are the friends and family who have supported you in music?
Oh man, there's so many. I mean, there's my parents. They've released music years and years ago, but seeing them do what they do has inspired me to do what I do. I have plenty of friends in the music world that have inspired me. A lot of them I sing with at my church. I was a part of a group called Shift. We've been a group since about 2009. So it's been 10 plus years that we've been together, and I always tell people my best memories and experiences in music are with my group. We've sung pretty much everywhere together, but we've had so many wonderful experiences singing together. And I've learned so much from our group leader that I tried to incorporate in my own music, that I'm still trying to incorporate in the music that I'm currently making. And it's like experiences like that, you can never pay for. So I really cherish the people that I've always had with me through music, and even some of the people that I've just now have connected with through music. It's all just, it's great. It's nothing that I can really pay for.
Definitely. Do you have any favorite musicians or songs?
Ooh, my favorite musician, aside from Beyonce, obviously, but my favorite musician is Imogen Heap. Mainly because when I had first gotten into her music was just so different than anything I had ever listened to, ever. From her singing style to the instruments that she used, which later I found out weren't actually instruments. She's a type of producer where she can literally record anything that happens around her, around the house, if she's outside in the city, and she manipulates that in the studio and makes them instruments. But their sound is so out of this world. It's almost like going into another dimension. And it was, I forgot which song it was. It was either her song called 2-1, or it was another song called The Moment I Said It. And the instruments that she used and her ability to hear certain chords and dissonances and all of that stuff, that was the instance that made me say, I want to make music, and specifically like her. So I try to incorporate what I love from Emojin Heat into my music, but I also try to make it my own. So
Excellent. Thank you, MimiQ, for sharing your time and insight with us today.
thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Great to have you. For our cherished viewers, we hope that you pick up and have a listen to The Dances of Us. It's on Amazon, Apple Music, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, Bandcamp, SoundCloud, or Deezer.
Yes.
You can support your favorite musicians by clicking the follow button on their artist page. And you can also click the like button and subscribe to this channel as well. Until next time, blessings be.
See you guys.